Welcome to Battles of Faith. We're your hosts, Ivor and Atante Myers. Today we're continuing our discussion about the French Revolution. The title of today's program is The Science of Music and the Beast. Now I know many of you are wondering, what are they going to say? How does the French Revolution affect music of today? Well, if you're about to change the channel or go to another room, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to sit down, grab your Bible, and go through the scriptures with us as we study this very important topic.
Yes, we have been dealing with the French Revolution. We have been discussing the beast from the abyss and showing how this beast that rises up from the abyss, according to Revelation chapter 11, verse 7, has a wide effect on what we see happening today with our young people. And we are going to be looking today at music. We have seen already evolution arising from this a beast from the abyss, from the French Revolution in our previous programs. Sexual perversion. We have looked at the issue of humanism and seen all these principles rising out of this prophetic event found in Revelation chapter 11. And again, I want to look at our first graphic rather, which we have been actually putting up there through some of the previous shows, speaking of this dissemination of the French Revolution, the principles that came out of the French Revolution. And it says here, the worldwide dissemination of the same teachings that led to the French Revolution all are tending to involve the whole world in a struggle similar to that which convulsed France. And that's the book Education, page 228. What we're seeing here is that the principles that arose out of the French Revolution that led to the French Revolution are now going out on a worldwide scale. It's almost like the French Revolution was a little test tube that the enemy was using. And now these things, humanism, evolution, sexual permissiveness, and now we're going to see music are all being, the principles that the enemy is trying to use are now being disseminated on a worldwide basis. We have a very interesting study today. We're going to be looking at a chart that we have created, and it is called the family tree of musical sorcery. And if it sounds interesting, that's because it is interesting. It's amazing to see the history of the kinds of music that we listen to today, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So I want to put our first slide up, our first graphic up rather, and we are going to see here at the bottom of this graphic, you see this family tree, and right at the bottom it says the Santo Domingo slave trade. And I want to give a little history about that. In 1492, Columbus discovered a little island or place by the name of Hispaniola. And little while later, the Spaniards sold this little Caribbean place to the French, and the French changed the name from Hispaniola to Santo Domingo. And it was here in Santo Domingo where it became one of the popular centers for slave trade. And what would happen is that the slaves would come in, would be brought into this place, Santo Domingo, and they were immediately baptized as Catholics. However, they were not allowed to read their Bibles. They were not allowed to really understand what it was that they were being baptized into. And what happened was these slaves being brought from various parts of Africa were separated so that they would not be able to really communicate with each other. That communication barrier was broken, and what happened is that these slaves began to come together and to synchronize their various religions. And so what they came up with was a religion which we know today as voodoo.
And it's something that they had in common from Africa,
That's
correct?
right.
I mean, they had these religions and worship services in Africa, and the only thing that they could still relate to each other was this religion,
That's
because
right.
they were forced to become Catholic, and They weren't able to publicly, if I'm correct, publicly do their religion. They had to do it in secrecy, so they couldn't
That's right.
publicly practice their voodoo tradition or religion.
That's right. So what happened is that you've got this synchronization of all these various gods. Now, that's very interesting, Atante, because when you look at the prophecy of Revelation chapter 11, where this beast that rises up out of the abyss is part of the location that is attributed to this beast is Sodom and also Egypt. We said in previous programs that Egypt was known for its denial of God.
Right.
When Pharaoh said, "Who is God that I should serve him?" But Egypt is also known for its multiplicity of gods. You'll remember when God was sending those plagues down upon the Egyptians, 10 plagues, they represented the 10 different gods. The gods of the water, the gods of the air, that Egypt was known for its multiplicity of gods. And interestingly enough, in this island or this place, Santo Domingo, you've got all these different gods coming together, being synchronized by the slaves, and you come up with this religion called voodoo. Now, what is so, special about voodoo? Hollywood makes a lot of fun about voodoo today,
Yeah,
and
they
people
do.
just kind of shove it off as well. But voodoo is an actual religion.
It is, and the appropriate name for it is Voodoo.
That's right.
It turned into voodoo once here in America. People started to pick it up, but the original name was Voodoo.
That's right. Now we're going to look at something. We're going to throw another graphic up here, and we see here the serpent figures heavily in the voodoo faith. The word voodoo has been translated as the snake under whose auspices gather all who share the faith. Interestingly enough, Atante, the central figure of voodoo is a serpent. And we know that as we look at the Bible, we see that the serpent is symbolic of the devil, of Satan. And so here you have these gods coming together, and you have the serpent as the central figure, and it is described as the religion under which all who gather share the faith. This serpent is symbolic of something that, according to the Bible, is satanic and wicked. Now, we're going to look at another graphic here. And this graphic describes what voodoo is about. Listen to this. There are hundreds of spirits called Loa who control nature, health, wealth, and happiness of mortals. The Loa form a pantheon of deities. During voodoo ceremonies, these Loa can possess the bodies of ceremony participants. Loa appear by possessing the faithful, who in turn become the Loa, become the Loa, relaying advice, warnings, and desires. Now listen to this. Music and dance are key elements to voodoo ceremonies. The dance is an expression of spirituality, of connection with divinity and the spirit world.
In other words, I like to paraphrase that almost like it's sign language to the gods. The different dance movements that they do during the voodoo service is an expression without words. It's speaking to them.
That's right. Now, and this is not a choreographed kind of dance. We're talking about people who were dancing according to what they were listening to,
right,
according to what they heard. So I'm going to put another graphic up and listen to this again. The fundamental of voodoo is the manifestation of the spirit world through the channel of a human being. It is necessary for the participant to be in a trance-like state to receive the spirits. This is induced by excitation brought on through the rhythm of dance, chanting, and drums, especially the voodoo drum called tambola. Once in a trance, the participant will not only be in touch with the spirits, but also his own unconsciousness, which will reveal secrets and guidance. Okay, so here we have this description of what voodoo is. Its key element, its holy instrument, is the drum. Its key elements are drum and dance.
Right.
And the serpent is the central figure of this voodoo or voodoo religion. Now, I want to read another statement here. And by the way, we don't have references for these. That's because we've gotten them from websites. And these websites are actually voodoo websites. In other words, they explain voodoo. So we don't want to put the source up there, but this is research that we're sharing with you. And listen to what this says. It is the dance that voodoo touches most closely to the mystical. For every motion that dancers perform is a magical metaphor for the invisible world. And it is no wonder that spirits arrive most often during the dance. For the divine recognizes itself and is drawn into the eternal movement of the dance.
So it's very much a part of their ceremony, the
That's
dance.
right.
It's essential for them to be possessed by the spirit.
That's right. In fact, in the voodoo religion, the dance is this type of, the dance represents a unity of the gods and the human body. It's as though they call it the gods are riding the body. And that's what happens when they come in, when the gods supposedly come in and the body begins to move serpent-like is what they say. The spine begins to move in a serpent-like way. And they say that this is the possession of the gods riding their subjects.
And again, I'm sure there's viewers out there who are thinking, hey, well, we're Christians, we don't partake in voodoo, and so what does this have to do with the music issues that we are facing today?
Okay, Atante, we've been dealing with the French Revolution, showing the spirit of anti-Bible and anti-God that arose out of that revolution. Well, how does this Santo Domingo and voodoo tie in with that? In 1791, right in the middle of the French Revolution, something happened on the island of Santo Domingo. The slaves of Santo Domingo saw what was happening in France. Now remember, this is a French Caribbean island.
Right.
They saw what was happening in France, and the same spirit of uprising that they saw taking place in France, as it were, imbued them. In other words, they looked at what was happening in France and said, we're going to stage an uprising as well. And lo and behold, you have this uprising, and to this day, this Santo Domingo staged the only successful revolt that was a successful revolt. And at this very time, the name of this island, Santo Domingo, was changed to Haiti.
And that's what we know it as today, is Haiti.
That's what we know it as today. And so Haiti, you know, the voodoo is a very integral part of Haiti.
It's a prominent religion.
That's right. And so what we can see, again, according to one of our quotes that we had just seen, that the principles that led to the French Revolution and are rising out of the French Revolution are now being disseminated on a worldwide level. We've seen it through evolution. We've seen it through sexual permissiveness. We've seen it through humanism. And now we're going to look at how this revolt in Haiti actually spread out. We're going to put our graphic up again, and you'll notice there on the third box up, the box highlighted, we have there the Beast from the Abyss, the French Haiti Revolution, or Haitian Revolution. They were really one and the same thing. Santo Domingo becomes Haiti, but now you look up to the right and you'll notice the Louisiana Purchase. What was the Louisiana Purchase all about? Very simple. France at this time had owned almost all of the middle of United States of America.
As we know today.
As we know it today. And the whole thing was called Louisiana. Well, in 1803, 1804, France sells Louisiana to America.
And we know it as the famous Louisiana Purchase.
Louisiana Purchase. And what's interesting about that, Atante, is we've already discussed that the Beast from the Abyss represented the things that took place in France, the revolution in France. The Beast from the Earth, Revelation 13:11, horns like a lamb, speak as a dragon, represents events taking place in the United States. In the Louisiana Purchase, you have France and you have the United States making this land agreement. Well, what's so significant about that? Well, part of the Louisiana Purchase, one of the places in which America now acquired as her own was a place called New Orleans.
And then slaves were then brought to New Orleans, and that started to be a major slave trade port for America.
Exactly, and that is where New Orleans is where voodoo entered into America.
A little side note, voodoo as a religion wasn't allowed to be practiced anywhere in America at that time except for New Orleans.
Right. And to even take that further, they were only allowed to practice their voodoo ceremonies on Sundays in Congo Square. And what happened is as these slaves came over to America, and as even the free came over to America and came to New Orleans, they brought their voodoo traditions with them, and they would begin practicing their voodoo at Congo Square. And what happened is you had people that were coming, Americans that would come, and this was kind of like a tourist spot. They would wonder, what is this strange music that these people are doing and this strange dancing, because it was foreign to America. And what happened was these tourists would see it, and it began to interest them so much that they wanted to imitate it. Part of the music, Atante, that began to be popular just around this time, the 1900s, was something known as ragtime. Ragtime actually sprung out of New Orleans as a result of the slaves that were brought into New Orleans. We can safely say, Atante, that ragtime, with its off-time rhythm, with its with the lawlessness that it brought with it, we can safely say that this also ascended out of the beast. Right. Or out of the abyss from that we saw arose out of the French Revolution. We've got Haiti, we've got Santo Domingo, we've got Haiti, we've got the French Revolution, we've got France selling Louisiana to America, we've got New Orleans with the slaves coming over, the voodoo practicing slaves coming over, and then we've got this music that is introduced to America for the first time called ragtime. From ragtime, we're going to put our graphic up there, and you're going to notice on graphic number 5, or box number 5, the highlighted box where it says New Orleans slaves migrate from Haiti, voodoo enters America. Slide number, or rather box number 6, ragtime is the music that comes out of this style that they brought to America. From there, you'll see the word, or the term R&B.
And that stands for rhythm and blues?
That stands for rhythm and blues, which sprung out of ragtime, okay? And so here you have this music that is beginning to evolve, change forms, transform itself, and it's moving from one style to another. Interesting thing about this, Atante, is we looked at the beast from the abyss and saw that this beast represented Egypt, who is God that I should know him, and Sodom, sexual permissiveness. And as you look at these styles of music and their origins and what they cause, we can ask the question, do we see Egypt? Who is God that I should obey him? Yes, because ragtime and rhythm and blues were music that were produced by those who did not want anything to do with God. Okay, they weren't into Christianity. They looked at that as the white man's religion, and so they came up with a different form of music. Said, this is our own. This is our music that expresses our sorrows, that expresses what we want to do. Where we don't have much, so we like to talk about those things that make us feel good, which at the time was sexual. Not at the time, even still now.
Right.
Sexual permissiveness, lawlessness. We see that in this style of music. We're going to look at our graphic again. We're going to notice that from R&B, the next box highlighted would be jazz. 1920s, and jazz, lo and behold, happens to be a sexual term, a term that was used
to describe sex.
To describe sexual acts. So here you have again this music is fitting to the description of Sodom given to the beast in Revelation chapter 11. Another interesting thing about this, Atante, is as you look at New Orleans and the celebrations that they have happening in New Orleans, in Revelation chapter 11 and I believe it's verse 10, it says there, and they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them, because of the two prophets that tormented them on the earth. We're speaking here about, remember, the Old and the New Testament. When the Old and the New Testament were put away, the people celebrated, as it were, because they were happy that God was out of the picture. You look at what's happening in New Orleans, you look at all these celebrations that are going on. There are celebrations of sin, of wickedness. You look at Southern decadence, a celebration that is a celebration of sexual permissiveness. You look at Mardi Gras, you look at the Jazz Festival, all these different celebrations which are for the most part accompanied with Sodom, sexual permissiveness, and Egypt, who is God, that I should obey him.
Right.
Okay? Looking at our graphic again, we see that from jazz in the 1920s, you come to rock and roll in the 50s and the 60s. And amazingly enough, rock and roll brought with it the spirit of rebellion. We can safely say that rock and roll ascended out of that abyss. And you look, Sodom, Egypt, are the principles there? Very much so. They are there. Now, rock and roll took two different turns in the 50s and 60s. Number one, in the island of Jamaica, they would listen to the music coming from New Orleans, which was popular music, pop music, rock and roll, jazz, blues. They would listen to this, but they would get it, the signal wasn't very strong, so it would break up, and it would go out at times and come back in. And what happened is that the Jamaicans formed this style of music that they call dub, where the music would play for a little while, and then they'd purposely stop it, and the DJ would talk. And then the music would start up again. This was called dub, and also the forerunner of reggae. Well, in the 1970s, reggae was taken from Jamaica and brought back over to America, and that is where you have the introduction of hip-hop in the 70s and 80s, beginning in Bronx, New York.
And that's where the rap music started.
And that's where hip-hop and rap music began. Let me jump back a little bit. We're going to put our graphic up one more time, and you're going to notice that large box there that says the Jesus movement, the Jesus movement. What was the Jesus movement? Some of you who were around in the 50s and 60s, or 60s rather, remember the Jesus movement. What happened there? The hippies from the rock and roll era decided that after trying drugs, they were going to try who? They were going to try Jesus. And what they did was they became Christians, but they took their music with them. Now remember where this music is coming from. It is coming from Santo Domingo, the voodoo spirit of worship, the gods entering the body and riding the body. And as you look at rock and roll, what was happening to what was happening to the young people? It was as though spirits were entering and just making them do all kinds of crazy, rebellious things. Okay? The Jesus movement took that music, and thus you have the birth of what is known today as CCM, Contemporary Christian Music. Now, let me say here that contemporary Christian music simply means music that is contemporary with our times. And I'm not saying that all contemporary Christian music is wrong, because artists should be free to do music that is up to date. But the kind of music that reflects what we see rising out of the abyss, that is where we take issue.
And the most important thing, taking it back to the voodoo religion, the way that they were able to create that dance and that movement was from the drum. The drummer was the key person in the voodoo ceremony to get them to move. You cannot dance in that way without the drum. And now, as we're looking at Christian music, you're thinking, okay, it's okay to have contemporary music, but if it carries the same element that the voodoo religion carried, then there's a problem.
Now, here's a powerful thing, Atante, is that when the slaves of Santo Domingo began to practice the voodoo, they didn't do it openly because they knew that the Catholics were watching them and that they had to be very careful. In other words, voodoo had the power to synchronize or hide itself under a religious disguise. You go to some of those countries today and you'll still see the element of Catholicism mixed with voodoo. Well, what we have happening in the 60s is this very same principle. Voodoo, which had transformed itself, evolved as it were, was able to adapt under this Christian guise, and now it found its way moving into what we now see as, we're going to put our graphic up one last time, we have Christian rap, Christian R&B, Christian rock, Christian jazz. And it's amazing, Atante, to see how this musical tree of sorcery began all the way back on this island, and through the French Revolution, it just exploded upon the world. I want to read this quote again, where it tells us that the worldwide dissemination of the principles that led to the French Revolution are leading the world into a state similar to that which convulsed France.
I have a powerful statement here. It's talking about Jimi Hendrix, who was in London at one time with a drummer from Africa who was part of the voodoo religion. Listen to what it says. Hendrix, had gotten a chance to see Rocky, which is the gentleman from Africa, and some other African musicians on the London scene. He found it a pleasure to play rhythms against their polyrhythms. They would totally get outside into another kind of space that he had seldom been in before. Rocky's father was a voodoo priest and the chief drummer of a village in Ghana, West Africa. Rocky's real name is Quasi. One of the first things Rocky asked Jimi was where he got that voodoo rhythm from. When Jimi demurred, Rocky went on to explain in his halting English that many of the signature rhythms Jimi played on a guitar were very often the same rhythms that his father played in voodoo ceremonies. The way Jimi danced to the rhythms of the playing reminded Rocky of the ceremonial dance to the rhythms his father played during their voodoo ceremonies, to the gods of thunder and lightning.
That's right. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that in the voodoo religion, the word syncopation simply means God, the gods, and humanity joining together in dance. That's what the word syncopation means. And as we think about what we see today, as Christians, we need to be aware that what we are up against is the beast from the abyss. He is rising up through evolution, through humanism, through drama, through sexual perversion, and now we're seeing even through music, he is trying to bring the world down into the abyss.
And into the church, because many of the contemporary Christian music that we hear today has the same rhythm and the same beat that you hear in the worldly music if you turn on your radio station. And here it is, that beat and rhythm came from the voodoo religion and the drums that they were playing to bring out those gods.
Yeah, we want to encourage our viewers to take this seriously. Hollywood has, you mentioned the word voodoo and people laugh, ha ha ha, you don't really believe in that stuff, do you?
It's a real religion.
It's a real religion. It is in reality able to disguise itself under many coverings, and we want to encourage our viewers who are struggling with this very issue to open the Word of God, to research this, to study it, and see for themselves if what we're saying is not true.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we're all out of time, but until next time, God bless.